You're getting drunk with the boys, and you have your beloved girlfriend on your hip, and she absolutely adores your hair. She is running her hands through your hair, and you keep getting drunker and drunker by the minute. Life is good, but before long, you're absolutely wasted, and you pass into a drunken stupor. You wake up with a horrendous haircut that your friends gave you while you were sleeping. Your girlfriend leaves you, and before she leaves, she says that your very best friend laid down the pipe better than you. Enraged, you sign up for an amateur fight to let out your frustrations. You are Marcin Tybura, and this is the Casual's Guide to Marcin Tybura versus Sergey Spivak. Some of these names are very difficult for me to pronounce. I will try my best, but some of the Moldovan names and Polish names are hard, especially as an American. Starting off the video, we will be taking a look into the career of Sergey Spivak, nicknamed the Polar Bear. Spivak is a younger fighter, being 29 years old, and he stands at 6'3". He also trains out of a lesser known gym called the Polar Bear Team. He is one of the few fighters who fight out of Moldova. Sergey had no amateur fights, therefore he went straight into the pros. He made his debut in 2014 fighting against Andrei Serebrennikov. He won that fight by knockout in the first round. Just 2 months later, he would fight again, facing off with Evgeny Bova. Winning that fight in the first round after sinking in a Kimura. Sergey would then go on fighting in January of 2015, facing off with Yuri Gorbenko, and once again he would land an armbar, ending the fight in the first round. Sergey was getting momentum at an alarming pace. Sergey would fight again at the end of 2015, going up against Dmitry Nakusta, beating his opponent by armbar, this time in the second round, his longest fight to date. Sergey would fight 3 months later in February of 2016, fighting Artem Cherkov, scoring a fantastic head kick knockout. Sergey would take the rest of the year off and focus on mastering his craft and getting more polished. So in March of 2017, he would make his return against Luke Morton and score a vicious knockout in just 40 seconds into the first round. Sergey was slowly becoming undeniable, a local star in Moldova, so they would have him fight an American veteran with an absurd amount of fights. That man was Travis Fulton. He has 255 wins, 143 wins by knockout, and 104 submissions. Needless to say, this was a huge test for Sergey. However, Sergey would pass this test with flying colors by sinking in a nasty rear naked choke and forcing the veteran to tap. Sergey would take the rest of the year off and enjoy the victories he had achieved. In March of 2018, he would face off with Ivo Kuk and finish it with a flurry of punches, knocking his opponent out in devastating fashion. Just a few months later in September, he would fight another veteran with an insane amount of fights, Tony Lopez. Tony has 99 fights. He has 29 knockout wins, 24 submission wins, and 12 decision wins. A total of 65 wins under his belt. But Sergey was just built different. He would crank the daylights out of Tony's neck and force him to tap in the very first round. Sergey was a local legend, unknown to the rest of the world, but he would make it in the papers and people would recognize him in the streets of Moldova. His wins over very experienced veterans didn't go unnoticed. He was on the UFC's radar, and he would make his UFC debut in May of 2019, going up against one of the best Muay Thai fighters at heavyweight, Walt Harris. This would be a very tough fight for Sergey because he would end up getting knocked out in the very first round, just 50 seconds in. This was devastating for him, but he knew he had a country behind him, and quitting was not an option. A few months later in October, he would make his second showing in the promotion, fighting a fan favorite, Bam Bam Tai Tuivasa. This would be a very fun scrap that showcased Sergey's patience and high fight IQ, getting the finish by arm triangle in the second round. This would give Sergey confidence. He proved to not only himself but to the promotion that he was a good fighter who could get wins over a experienced UFC fighter. Sergey would take some time off and eventually fight again in February of 2020 against a man we will be covering later in this video, Marcin Tybura. This would be a back and forth scrap, but at the end of the day, Marcin took home the win by unanimous decision. This was a rough wake-up call for Sergey. This was far harder than his regional fights, but he still had confidence and was still improving his craft. He would fight again in July of that same year against Carlos Felipe. This was a one-sided fight showcasing his striking and grappling, and ended up winning by decision. He was back in the win column once again. He would take some time off to further improve and polish his game, and in February of 2021, he would face off with Jared Vanderaa. Sergey would showcase his boxing and show the fans that he was just getting started by knocking out Jared at the end of the second round. This was his second win in a row, and regaining some momentum, he would fight again in June of that same year against another very experienced veteran, Alexei Oleinik. For reference, Oleinik has a total of 80 wins, 8 knockouts, 48 submission wins, and 5 decision wins. This would be one of the hardest fights on paper due to Oleinik's legendary jiu-jitsu, but Sergey would once again showcase his high fight IQ by beating Oleinik by unanimous decision. This was a huge win for Sergey, and he would earn himself another push, and in his next fight, he would fight another fan favorite and current interim champion, Tom Aspinall. This was akin to sending a lamb out for slaughter, because Tom would end up knocking him out in the first round just 2 minutes in. This was devastating, but he reminded himself that he still had an entire country behind him, and giving up was never an option. So the UFC would give him a fighter that the fans despise. A woman beater, a former NFL player who made it to the Pro Bowl, Greg Hardy. This fight would have the fans watching Sergey and praying he would knock Hardy out or beat the brakes off of Hardy, and Sergey would do just that by getting the TKO just 2 minutes into the first round. This would give Sergey some new fans from outside of his own country because nobody liked Hardy. After getting back in the win column, Sergey would fight Augusto Sakai in August of 2022, and he would knock him out in the second round just 3 minutes in. After regaining momentum and confidence, he would fight yet another fan favorite and knockout king, Derek Lewis. This was a huge test for Sergey because he hasn't had good luck when it comes to fighting good strikers, but he would change that by sinking in an arm triangle choke and forcing the tap 3 minutes into the first round. Sergey was on the cusp of fighting at the top 5, and he would end up fighting one of the best kickboxers in the UFC, Cyril Gane. This would not go Sergey's way because he would get knocked out again in the second round just 3 minutes in. And that brings us to this weekend. Sergey is going to get a rematch with Marcin Tybura. Sergey's record stands at 16 wins, 4 losses, 7 wins by knockout, and 7 wins by submission, as well as 2 decision wins, leaving him with an 88% finishing rate when he won. He has lost 3 times by knockout and has lost 1 decision. So it's safe to say that Sergey Spivak is a kill or be killed fighter who can knock you out or choke you out. Now, it is finally time to break down the career of Marcin Tybura. Marcin is a decorated fighter outside of the UFC. He also has a master's degree in physical education, so when he eventually retires, he could be a personal trainer or even your local gym teacher. He was born and raised in Poland, so he is much more popular over there than he is in the United States. He is at the latter end of his career, being 38 years old. He stands also at 6'3". In fact, his last weigh-in, he only weighed 247 pounds rather than the weight limit at 265. He also trains out of Ankos MMA. A young Tybura made his professional debut back in 2011. He would fight Robert Morat, and he would show out in spectacular fashion by sinking in the rear naked choke just 3 minutes into the first round. He would fight again that same night against Adam Wychorak, and he would beat Adam by decision. He was riding high after getting back-to-back wins in that same night. Just 8 days later, he would fight again against Stanislaw Slakowicz. Marcin would get back to his finishing ways by beating Stanislaw by triangle choke just 3 minutes into the first round. Marcin was looking unstoppable, but he knew he still needed to improve, so he would fight again in February of 2012, and once again fighting Andrei Golecki. He would finish the fight 3 minutes into the first round by sinking in a rear naked choke. With his first 4 fights going the way they were, he realized he might be able to make this a full career. Marcin would go on to be the main event for the first time in June of 2012 when he would fight Szyman Bajor. This would be a back and forth scrap leading to a split decision win for Tybura. He would fight again at the end of the same year in December when he would face off with Krzysztof Koptowski. Tybura would beat Krzysztof to the point his opponent would retire from the sport. This would get the attention of a great promotion, M1 Global. And in February of 2013, Tybura would make his M1 debut going up against Dennis Komkin. And once again, he would knock out his opponent and force Komkin to retire. After making 2 people retire back-to-back times, he would fight a tougher challenge in August of that same year when he would fight Chodbin Ka. He would once again knock out his opponent in quick fashion, finishing Ka just 2 minutes into the first round. Marcin would fight just a few months later in October of 2013 when he would face off with Konstantin Luhov. He would not knock out his opponent. However, he would sink in a submission just 4 minutes into the first round. Marcin was on pace to be champion in M1, but he still needed to get another win. So in April of 2014, he would fight Maro Hurak, and once again, he would get another knockout on his resume. Not in the first round, but in the third round. This would be impressive enough to get the title shot, and in August of that same year, he would fight Damian Grabowski for that heavyweight strap. This was a huge test for Marcin because Grabowski would fight in the UFC. However, he got finished in just 14 seconds into the first round, so he ended up getting cut. And this fight would not go much different outside of the knockout because Marcin would sink in a nasty rear naked choke and get the tap. Just 1 minute into the first round, Marcin was on cloud 9, winning his first belt, as well as still being undefeated. He would waste no time in attempting to achieve his first title defense because in November of 2014, he would attempt to do just that, this time fighting Denis Smoldarev. Similar to his last fight, he would be no match for Marcin because just 3 minutes into the first round, he would get the rear naked choke. After Marcin proved himself to be a true heavyweight champion in M1, he would get a great opportunity to achieve double champ status, as well as participate in a super fight, fighting against German fighter Steven Puet. And this was a highly anticipated fight that would take place in May of 2015. However, Tybura would fall short of achieving double champ status because he would get hit with a brutal knee in the clinch, cutting his face open and shattering his nose, and it would get chalked down as a doctor stoppage, but a TKO on paper. This was just a bump in the road. Tybura was still one of the biggest prospects in Poland that wasn't former champion and Hall of Fame fighter, Fabricio Verdum. This would be a very tough fight for Tybura because he would get beaten in all 3 rounds, losing by unanimous decision. This was a rough wake-up call, but what better way to move past a loss than to fight again shortly after. And in February of 2018, he would do just that by stepping into the octagon with the knockout king, Derrick Lewis. Unfortunately, Tybura would find out the hard way as to why everyone calls Lewis the knockout king, because 2 minutes into the 3rd round, Tybura would get knocked out. This was the first time Tybura has lost back-to-back times and has gotten finished outside of the doctor stoppage. Tybura would fight again that same year of 2018, going up against the skyscraper Stefan Struve, and Tybura would prove once again that he is legit and that he also had a high fight IQ by beating Struve by decision. Tybura would take the rest of the year off and return to the octagon again in April of 2018 when he would fight Shamil Abdurakhimov. Fortunately, Tybura's winning ways were short-lived because he would get knocked out again in the 2nd round. Tybura would fight again in September when he would fight Augusto Sakai. However, this turned out to be a bad move because just 59 seconds into the fight, he would get knocked out again. Things were looking very bleak for Tybura. He went from a 3-fight win streak to going 1-4 in his last 5 fights. His UFC venture seemed to be coming to an end, but the UFC would give him another opportunity to prove himself, and in February of 2020, he would fight the man featured in the start of the video, Sergey Spivak. And Tybura would not disappoint because, as you guys know, he would beat Sergey in all 3 rounds and get the decision win. Sergey was finally back in the win column, and he would waste no time getting another fight, and in July, Tybura would fight Maxim Grinchin. And in doing so, he would beat Maxim by decision once again. He finally was starting to regain his momentum, and in October, Tybura would fight a fan favorite, Ben Rothwell. And once again, Tybura would prove his worth and showcase his superior grappling, beating Rothwell by unanimous decision. After getting this fight, there was still room to get another fight in, and Tybura would fight an infamous fighter, NFL star, as well as former Pro Bowler Greg Hardy. And in fantastic fashion, Tybura would knock out Hardy in the 2nd round. The fans cheered for the downfall of Hardy. After getting 4 wins in a row, Tybura would fight again in June of 2021, going up against Walt Harris, and he would show off his improved striking by knocking out Harris in the 1st round. He was now on a 5-fight win streak and had a ton of momentum behind him, so the UFC would give him a step up in competition, giving a widely beloved Russian fighter, Alexander Volkov. Unfortunately, Volkov's height and striking gave Tybura a ton of problems, eventually leading him to lose by unanimous decision, but there was still hope, and Tybura was still confident. He would wait almost a year to fight again, sharpening his tools and mastering his craft even more, and in August of 2022, he would face off with Alexander Romanov, and he would show the fans that he was still a problem, beating Romanov by majority decision. He would take the rest of the year off and fight again in February of 2023, going up against Blagoy Ivanov, and Blagoy would get dominated, losing to Tybura by decision. Tybura had finally gotten back to his winning ways once again, so the UFC would give him a huge test against one of the best prospects in the world, Tom Aspinall, but Tom would prove to be too fast and too powerful for Tybura, knocking him out in the 1st round just 2 minutes in. This was a brutal loss for Tybura. Not only did he get knocked out, but he was put on a highlight reel. So Tybura would fight again a year later, and in March, he would make that well-known walk once again, when he would face off with a fan favorite and veteran of the sport, Tai Tuivasa. People were writing off Tybura because Tai had very good hands and brutal leg kicks, but Tybura would make the fans eat those words, getting a rear naked choke in the 1st round just 4 minutes in. He exposed Tai for having extremely lackluster grappling, especially on his back. And that brings us to this weekend with Tybura giving a rematch to Sergey Spivak. Before we make a prediction, we will look at Tybura's career. He has 25 wins and 8 losses, 9 wins by knockout and 7 submission wins, as well as 9 decision wins. leaving him with 64% finishing rate. He has 8 losses, 5 of those have been by way of the knockout. He has never been submitted, and he has lost 3 decision wins. So similar to Spivak, Tybura is a kill or be killed fighter. Overall, I'm leaning towards Tybura to get the win. He is more experienced and has a more well-rounded game, but he has a slow paced fighter. Overall, I'm leaning towards Tybura to get the win. He is more experienced and has a more well-rounded game, but he is a slow-paced fighter who doesn't have a great chin. So, if Sergey can land clean with a few hard shots, his chances of winning skyrocket. My prediction is Tybura by decision. Let me know who you guys have winning this fight in the comments below. If you like the content, be sure to like and subscribe, as it is the only way to support the channel. And as always, I hope you learned something and enjoyed the video. And I hope you guys have a great week and have fun watching the fights. Bye.